If you haven't been living under a rock today, then you've heard the news by now. Florida State has made some coaching staff changes with the dismissal of offensive coordinator Alex Atkins, defensive coordinator Adam Fuller, and wide receivers coach Ron Dugans. We're going to have a series of breakdown videos here on Warchant TV talking about all three of those moves. But on this edition of the show, I guess you could say, Ben Spicer, Matt LaSerre here, talking about Adam Fuller and what that moves means to Florida State. And Matt, this was an interesting point you brought up. When you look at the primary recruiters on the On3 database for a lot of these guys, Adam Fuller isn't the primary guy. So what are kind of the ramifications with this move, and what's kind of the sense that you're getting with commits and targets as well with Adam Fuller's dismissal from the FSU football team?
Yeah, overall, like you said, he's not really the main recruiter for a lot of these guys who are committed. So it's not huge to me, right? He's still going to be a big part of it. Like, they're still going to watch film with him. He's the defensive coordinator. He's definitely going to be a part of the defensive side recruiting process, like, without a doubt. But it just hasn't seemed as tight as most of these guys. The one story I remember that it could affect is Kevin Wynn, is when he committed, if you guys remember, he committed right outside of right in College Town, kind of not in the middle of it, but towards the end. When he was walking out of like Madso area, and when he walked out of the player experience or where you plant the spirit, all that, he immediately hugged Fuller because he was telling him he committed right there, and you could tell there they have a bond. Like, again, he's close with these kids, but he's just not the main recruiter. Maybe he was with Kevin Wynn. That's the one I think of when I come to maybe an effect of it, and his commitment was already shaky anyway, so that kind of adds on to it.
There's a couple players or a couple schools that are players in the potential flip of Kevin Wynn, right? I know Michael, me and him were talking on a video last week, and he brought up South Carolina, I think it's a name. So I think that's someone you have to look at, Kevin Wynn, that is a potential flip target for Florida State. But you've gotten the chance to talk to some of these commits and get reaction from some of them. And one that stood out to me was four-star DB Zay Thomas, his reaction to the Fuller news. And then who else did you get to talk to related to the defensive coordinator for Florida State?
Yeah, so obviously Greg Zay Thomas, he said it was tough, but he had a great relationship with him, but obviously something had to change. For him, I wouldn't – personally, right now, I'm not super worried about him. He hasn't really done a whole lot of taking other visits and stuff. Keep in mind, also with him, it goes a lot deeper than just the coaches because he's a Seminole tribe member, so playing at Florida State is much deeper than who's coaching him on the field. I think it has a lot to do with just personal stuff like that. Another guy – Daryl Dessard is the guy who committed today. We had a video earlier. He committed today. I talked to him. He said it changes nothing for him and stuff happens. TJ Griffin was kind of an interesting one. I think I gave him a Tony Pollard moment. Like if you saw when Tony Pollard found out that Dan Quinn had left the Cowboys over the last season. That's happened a few times. I kind of feel bad like I'm telling these kids the news a little bit, but he said it's new to him, and he hopes he can get someone like Odell, because I guess he's closer with Odell, like we said, not super primary. This kid's not committed yet. I believe he commits in 2 weeks on November 23rd between Ole Miss, Cincinnati, and Florida State. But he said hopefully they get someone with knowledge of how a good defense should and will be ran. Another kid, Tadarius Hughes, who's a 2026 commit on the defensive safety. He said he was shocked, but he's still fully committed to Norvell. So again, the main like message from the defensive guys hasn't been that this affects their commitment a whole lot, at least from what I've seen. I think we'll see that more on the offensive side, and we'll get into that later on another video. But in general, I think a lot of these defensive guys are still okay for now. Obviously, there hasn't been any defensive assistant firing or anything there yet, so we still have to wait for that down the road. And from watching the live stream people did earlier, that's probably coming. You just can't clean house when you still have 2 games left, but you could start it. You have to at this point, how bad the FSU is. But it just – you don't really get the vibe that anyone's super affected yet, and they're kind of still waiting to see.
It seems like to pile on, this is like the worst year for this to happen as well because the early signing day moves up 2 or 3 weeks. So what kind of additional challenge, additional stress does that put on Florida State considering their season ends November 30th? I mean, you don't have a quick turnaround. Obviously, if there's a coach that you're pursuing that's currently coaching with a school, it becomes a little difficult to, make that announcement. And so what kind of challenge is that for FSU, and how do you think Coach Norvell kind of responds and handles that?
I mean, if he's going to want to keep these guys, he's going to have to be hands-on himself with all of them, right? Or at least if you know – at this point, they probably know who's staying and who's going when it comes to the rest of the assistants, I would assume, or at least I hope so. But you probably get your guy that you know is staying no matter what, whether that's Pat Surtain, whoever it is, and you go, well, you need to come with me on all these visits for everyone on the defense. Maybe it's Randy Shannon. I know we all hope it's not Randy Shannon, but he's the interim DC right now. That's kind of, you got to have to take in your own hands and bring the guys you really trust who's on the staff. And at this point, man, the 2025 class might even be lost. You might just have to focus on 2026 and really hitting the ground running in the portal.
Lastly, this is more of a positive question, or at least it might be. I don't know. It remains to be seen at this point in time. But do you think there's, guys that last minute went to other schools like a Tavion Wallace, or, guys who flipped to a different school like Javion Hilson or Myron Charles, who might reconsider Florida State depending on who they hire? Or do you think some of those battles are just a lost cause at this point?
I think 100% there. I mean, if there's a guy that they've had a previous relationship with that, they've been recruited by this other school, say they like Florida State, but it was just like the coaching was the part, and right, that was what didn't sell them. And now they bring in this other guy who was the good coach they liked at this other school. Why wouldn't they reconsider Florida State? But also what you have to think about there is how quickly they're going to get this hire done. Like you said, they're going to be coaching a different school, all this kind of stuff. There's a lot of extra factors that they would have to get the hire process done within the next week or two to really have a chance at that. Even this is an example I used before they fired coaches, but the offensive line coach at Georgia Tech, where obviously Josh Petty committed, was with Rick Stockstill at Middle Tennessee for years, who's now an analyst at on the Florida State staff. I'm not making hot boards. I'm not calling out that as a name, but just as an example, if that guy became the new offensive line coach, obviously Josh Petty liked him at Georgia Tech. If he's had to sign at Georgia Tech, why wouldn't he then consider Florida State again because he committed to that guy there?
Right.
That's a hypothetical situation. That's not putting anything down on paper, but that's completely hypothetical.
Definitely something to keep an eye on, and obviously we'll be monitoring and tracking all that stuff here over the next couple of weeks as the 2024 season winds down. But make sure you stay tuned to the Premium Recruiting Board over at warchant.com. That's where Matt and Michael will have the latest on FSU football recruiting. The transfer portal is going to start to heat up soon, Matt, so we'll have coverage from that. I think we'll be back to doing our videos every day or every couple days here.
Probably, especially this year.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. But make sure you head over there, check out all the articles, and Matt will be getting some more quotes likely over the next couple hours as well from commits and targets related to the news. And, of course, this is just one of our reaction videos reacted to the dismissal of Adam Fuller, defensive coordinator. We'll also be talking about Alex Atkins and Ron Dugan, so make sure you check those out here on Warchant TV as well. Until then, from Matt LaSerre, I'm Ben Spicer. We'll see you next time.